Gwendolyn Graham, born August 6, 1963, and Cathy Wood, March 2, 1962, were 24 and 25-year-old lesbians from Grand Rapids, Michigan, killed 5 elderly female nursing home patients for sexual pleasures. They would smother their victims and then make love to relive the sensation and intensify their lovemaking. Wood, a 450-pound woman, deeply loved Graham. Wood confessed after Graham moved to Texas. Graham got life and Wood 20 years. Wood notified her ex-husband about the killings, either because she was frightened Graham might hurt the children in her care at her new employment, or because Graham had a new girlfriend. Police charged Graham with 6 murders and named Wood the prosecution's main witness. Wood blamed her twisted ex-lover, as expected. Wood testified in 1988 that Graham smothered the helpless women while she watched. Graham was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life without parole after a quick trial. Wood got 20 to 40 years. Graham, a nurse's assistant, and Wood, her supervisor, met at Alpine Manor. They became lovers in 1986. Sexual asphyxia improved orgasms. Graham discussed murder as a sexual game. Graham attempted to murder elderly folks using Wood as a lookout. The women fought back. Graham entered the room of an Alzheimer's patient in January 1987, who was unable to defend herself and became the pair's first victim. An autopsy was not done because the woman died naturally. 4 Alpine Manor patients were slain in the following months. Several of the 65 to 97 victims had Alzheimer's disease and were handicapped. Graham and Wood chose victims whose initials spelled MURDER as a game. Graham kept victim trinkets to remember their deaths. Graham displayed her mementos as she boasted of suffocating 6 victims to her employees, but no one believed them. Wood refused to kill a patient to prove her love to Graham, ending the relationship. Wood moved shifts. Graham relocated to Texas with another woman and worked in an infant hospital. In 1988, Wood's ex-husband reported the murders to the authorities. In October 1988, her ex-husband told the police, prompting an investigation. After a year, the first victim was unearthed. Kent County Morgue examined the coffin. Police pursued 5 of 8 victims. Wood and Graham were arrested with enough proof. Graham was jailed in Tyler, Texas, in December 1989 for jokingly scaring co-workers. Wood plea bargained for a lesser sentence by alleging Graham planned and committed the murders while she was a lookout or distracted supervisor. Graham received 5 life sentences for 5 murders and 1 conspiracy to murder on November 3, 1989. She lives in Huron Valley Complex, 4 female offenders. Wood was charged with second-degree murder and conspiracy. From March 2, 2005, she has been eligible for parole after serving 20 years on each count. Wood will be freed from the minimum security federal correctional institution in Tallahassee, Florida, on June 6, 2021. Alpine Manor owners were sued for recruiting dangerous and unbalanced personnel by many families. Sanctuary at St. Mary's presently occupies Alpine Manor's edifice. Alpine Manor fatalities were a game. The killers first planned to pick victims alphabetically to tease the police. Luckily, the plotters had to change their scheme, because the aged women first chosen still had too much fight left in them. Whatever. They still killed simple prey. Gwen Graham, born in 1963 in California, was raised in Tyler, Texas. She was polite to her teachers, but constantly seemed melancholy. Afterwards, she blamed her father's sexual advances for her melancholy, but he denied it. Graham worked as a nurse's aide at Alpine Manor Nursing Center in Walker, a Grand Rapids suburb, after moving to Michigan in 1986. Alpine Manor's 24-year-old Cathy Wood oversaw Graham. When her 7-year marriage ended, Wood was alone in Grand Rapids and 450 pounds. She was promoted to supervisor of nurses' aides at Alpine Manor in July 1985, but her social life was empty until she met Gwen Graham at work. Wood lost weight and enjoyed gay bars, parties, and casual sex as their friendship turned lesbian. But Graham was her first love, and by late 1986, they had promised eternal love. Gwen mentioned intentional murder in October, but her partner assumed we were fooling. Gwen enjoyed tying Cathy up and suffocating, or covering her face with a pillow during sex. Cathy kept her gaming complaints to herself. She slowly discovered that pain and pleasure can be thrilling. Alpine Manor homicides occurred from January through early April 1987. Gwen's murder game failed when her prey fought so hard she had to let them live. No one complained about her missteps. Wood and Graham were well liked by ward patients and received excellent reviews from their bosses. Gwen decided she would only target women who were beyond self-defense. Her lover was the lookout, watching the murder and the nurses' station at once and diverting personnel who got too close while Graham snuffed her victim with a washcloth over the nose and mouth. They sometimes went straight to an empty room for sex after the killing. Gwen saved treasures like anklets, handkerchiefs, brooches, and dentures. The murderous lovers boasted of their body count to colleagues, who laughed it off as sick jokes. 3 nurses' aides spotted the shelf of keepsakes in Wood and Graham's house, but none believed the murderous boasts. Wood and Graham broke up by April 1987. Cathy's shift change saved her from killing someone to prove her devotion. By then, Gwen was dating Heather Barriger, another lesbian, who traveled with her to Texas, leaving Cathy behind. Cathy told her ex-husband in August, but Kenwood waited 14 months before calling police. Gwen Graham worked at Mother Frances Hospital in Tyler, calling Cathy. Grand Rapids police initially doubted Ken Woods. In the first quarter of 1987, Alpine Manor had 40 natural deaths, but 8 stood out. Detectives eliminated 3, leaving 60-year-old Marguerite Chambers, 89-year-old Edith Cole, 95-year-old Myrtle Luce, 79-year-old Mae Mason, and 74-year-old Belle Brocard. There was no scientific evidence of murder, but Ken Wood's statement and the home staff's second thoughts were enough. In December 1988, Wood was arrested in Grand Rapids for murdering Cook and Chambers. Gwen was jailed on a $1 million bond in Texas, where reports of the Michigan inquiry had cost her her job. Graham returned to face charges after a brief extradition fight. The arrests overwhelmed Alpine Manor's personnel, but some remembered Gwen's unpredictability and Graham's fury. Former nurses' aides Deborah Kidder, Nancy Harris, Lisa Lynch, Dawn Mayle, and Russell Thatcher reconsidered the disgusting jokes and keepsakes they ignored while saving lives. 4 prosecution witnesses testified against Gwen Graham, with Cathy Wood becoming the star witness overnight. Wood was sentenced to 20 to 40 years, after pleading guilty to second-degree murder in September 1989. She testified against Gwen 3 months later in exchange for leniency, sealing her ex-fate. Lovers Cathy reported Gwen tried to suffocate at least 5 survivors in addition to the 5 dead. Woods confessed to her husband out of fear that Graham would harm children in her new job at the Texas hospital. Wood told the court that it was terrible enough that she killed people at Alpine and I did nothing. I had to stop her when she called and said she wanted to bash a baby. I knew she worked in a hospital. She intended to smash one of the babies against a window. Must act. Self-care was gone. Graham's lawyer portrayed Wood as a jealous, nasty liar to make his client a sacrificial victim, but jurors disagreed. Gwen was convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder, and 1 of conspiracy, after 7 hours of deliberation. Graham received 6 life sentences, without parole on November 2, 1989. Gilbert's excitement is nothing compared to the next caregivers. In 1987, 2 Walker, Michigan lesbians sexualized death. Gwendolyn Gale Graham, 23, and Catherine May Wood, 24, worked at Alpine Manor Nursing Facility. Graham was a nurse's helper under Wood. Wood needed a companion after divorcing and gaining a lot of weight. Graham and she hit it off immediately and became lovers. Graham introduced murder. Wood later said Graham was joking because they used sexual suffocation to increase orgasms. Their sexual games were tied to brutality. Talking about murder aroused them. They killed patients whose initials spelled murder from January to March. This was Graham's murder game. Wood was sentry, and she started with several elderly people, but they struggled so much she had to back off. They never complained, and most patients enjoyed these two women. Graham then entered a woman with Alzheimer's who couldn't fight her. A washcloth smothered her. She then moved on to another. She and Wood had sex in an empty room when killing aroused her. Graham removed jewelry or dentures from the victims to relive what she had done and found great emotional relief in murder. They got even more aroused when they washed the bodies during post-mortem. They boldened. Because confessing increased their sexual drive, they told co-workers, but they were laughed at. Graham showed 3 aides her memento shelf without interruption. Graham urged Wood to participate more. She must kill a patient to prove her devotion. Wood had to switch shifts since she wasn't ready. Graham left Michigan to work at a Texas newborn hospital after dating another lady. Wood told her ex-husband everything, but it took him a year to act. He phoned cops last. 8 of the 40 patients who died in that 3-month period were suspect enough for additional inquiry. They chose 5 and arrested both women. Wood testified against her ex-lover for 20 to 40 years. She came forward because Graham told her she wanted to take one of the babies and bash it up against a glass. Graham said her father molested her, but this was never substantiated. Her lawyer also claimed that Wood lied to obtain revenge on a lover who left her. Set up. Jurors believed Wood. Graham was convicted of 5 first-degree murders and 1 conspiracy to kill. Wood said she tried to smother 5 more patients. 6 life sentences without parole. Male and female swindlers that use vulnerable patients are evil. They break trust and are sadistic. They make everyone distrust the healthcare system, whether it's because of a tragic past or a craving for control. Hence, their harm exceeds their victims. They ultimately victimize society. The case inspired Lowell Cauffiel's 1992 real crime novel Forever and 5 Days. Graham and Wood discussed their connection and crimes in 2 episodes of The Serial Killers.